I would be surprised. No, just an avid reader at this point. After 10 years on the festival and at the store, it's nice to just be here for a bit. It's nice to pause a little.
I always feel like that. I'm like, I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Even I might want to do it's too much.
Yeah.
Surrounded by it all the time.
I think he really has blinders on for stuff sometimes. Like, he really tunes out what he doesn't care for.
I think we're good. Hello.
There we go.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming, folks.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
are you not on?
I don't think I'm on.
Not yet. Can we get Hoche's mic on?
You can just translate for John.
Yeah. Oh, we should be good.
Hey, there we go. Thank you for coming, folks.
Perfect. Welcome. My name is Andrew, and I thought a bit in lieu of me reading a bio introducing you, I was reading you talking about the Stone Project and how they came to you with the sort of the concept what they'd already had sort of fleshed out, and you said you were going to take it and turn it into an HCA joint.
Yes.
And so I thought maybe a good way of introducing yourself would be talking about what you think it means to be an HCA joint.
Wow, Jesus. Start with the easy questions. Probably something a little bit confrontational.
Okay.
A little bit confrontational, a little bit political, and definitely something that likes to explore human dynamics. You know, I've done a little bit of work that's sort of explored the fantasy realm, and I enjoy that. But the majority of my stuff is just about, you know, regular human beings in conflict with one each other, without any kind of fantasy elements or superheroic elements or any of that. Again, not putting it down, I'm into that, but my stuff just tends to be a little bit outside that realm. So I guess is that an answer?
I think it is. Like I was reading just this morning a couple issues of Wise Son.
Oh my God.
I was doing some research. Okay.
It's set in the Milestone universe for superhero stuff, but so much of I think I did the first two issues. So it isn't until issue 2 that Wise Son gets shot at. And his power, and he reveals his like invulnerability powers, and I was so just caught up in the day-to-day drama of the people that I was like, wait, what? How did he not like fall over or something? Because it was so much about these like real people in the city that they were living in, the problems, the interrelational problems they were having. So I think that fits. I think that makes sense. That's pretty
Thank
good.
you for that, sir. Appreciate it. Your generosity.
No problem. There's other stuff that I was, like I said, I was doing research and following up and thinking about some of the things that you've been talking about recently. And I mentioned I was at the book launch for Godhead 2 in Toronto, and a thing that I think a lot of people mention with you is because you are very multidisciplinary as an artist, you not just as a writer and an illustrator, but also as an author and in film, doing work there. A lot of people ask you about how film impacts your comics work, and you said at the time that you were much more interested. You were not interested in this cross-pollination of like how to make comics more like film or how to bring other media in. It was really about like focusing on what comics do themselves and really building on that. And I would love to hear more about like what you think it is that the unique power that comics have to be themselves.
Right. That's fascinating. It's a little bit difficult to quantify because there's so much overlap between film and comics. Needless to say, they're both using pictures to tell a narrative, and there are certain limitations in how deep we can go into the characterization. By that I mean, whereas in a novel, you can really like get deep into what the character's psychology is and their backstory and their thoughts and whatnot, and so forth, and so on and so forth. In film and in comics, unless you use thought balloons and or captions, which I tend to avoid, you're kind of stuck with what you can glean from what the character actually does, what's on their face, that type of thing. So that, like I said, there's a lot of cross-pollination between the two. But film is very seductive in that you've got sound, you've got movement, you've got, generally speaking, beautiful people kind of absorbing your attention. There's a lot of razzle and dazzle. With comics, it's more about it's not that we can't have that kind of razzle dazzle, but it tends to be more about the more intimate moments. And it's about it. I feel comics tend to favor human dramatics and intimate moments over action, just because if we're comparing a superhero action sequence on the page, which could be dynamic and exciting, it tends to pale next to a bust up on the big screen. It just does. So what I'm interested more in now is, rather than, because I used to really want to kind of make my comics little movies, and then excuse me, as soon as I'm so sorry, once I actually picked up a camera, I kind of removed that need to kind of make one thing the other, and I really wanted to just focus on what comics do. And I kind of laid out some of that, but also they're beautiful kind of design engines. Like I'm a great appreciator of composition in illustration and in great design work. Mixing beautiful images with like powerful like typography. That's possible in film as well, but that doesn't tend to be one of film's strengths. If I were to do that in film, that would be me taking some of comic book strengths and trying to apply that to film. So yeah, there are things that we do that other media don't do, that I really want to like focus more on that.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense, and especially considering how reading comics is so up to, in some ways, the reader and how they pace through it.
Absolutely.
And I like, as a reader, I'm someone who really goes through a book pretty quickly, getting just like the feel of the interaction, the characters and stuff, but then going through on the second read where you really drink in some of the pages or the details or background stuff, and that really helps those intimate moments deepen, because you can just sit there for 20 minutes, half an hour, and again, a scene, if you're watching a movie, it's just like, this was a 10-second scene that's like over and gone.
I watched, we went to go see Sin City when it came out, which wasn't a film that I really liked. I wanted to like that movie more because I was a big fan of the comics. And I kind of like, what I liked about that movie was it was really seedy, like I could just feel the grime.
Yeah.
And I kind of liked that they were able to capture that. But what I hated was that they were going out of their way to try to make it a comic book on the screen. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Adapt the material and make it like native to the form that you're working in. That's my take.
No, I think, yeah, the stuff that I remember from watching Sin City is not that different than seeing like when they were experimenting with motion comics,
Right.
where they're just like animating a panel very like, and you're like, yeah, that's what it looks like, but it doesn't have, I was like, why would I watch this?
Absolutely.
Because you mentioned the being a fan of the Sin City comics and Frank Miller, and I know you are David McKean and that what are some other names? I watched some. You did like Sienkiewicz and
Usual Suspects.
Yeah. Are you a Corbin guy as well?
I love Corbin.
Okay.
Corbin's one of the greatest of all time.
I saw a lot more Corbin like faces when I was reading Godhead. I think, or like just like I think also maybe because he's getting some reprints like right now, so I've seen this a bit more frequently.
Mutant World coming out soon.
Yeah.
Excited about Mutant World.
I'm wondering if you are like, just because I think like a lot of comic stuff is very cyclical, and there are lots of people that are going back into some of the anthology mode of comics and the way that like 8-Ball would have been back in the day. Do you see those guys like Miller and Chaikin and people, like do you see their style coming back with folks, or was there a time where you went away from it and came back?
Are you talking about me personally?
Yeah.
Do you mean am I still stealing from them? Is that the question?
Well, because I was reading.
The answer is yes.
I think I was reading Sand and Fury, and there was a lot of moments in there where I was like, oh, this is very like Dave McKean, but that book was like a 2000s book, and it really, I don't think at the time, a lot of people were still looking at Dave McKean the same way. And now when I go back, I really see it because since then, like Cages have been reprinted and audiences have found it again. So do you find yourself still going back and taking from that?
Yeah, I mean, I that stuff got so deep in me that in some ways, I never really need to look at it again because I just absorbed every lesson possible. So I don't go to the old influences in the same way that I used to, like just looking for solutions, desperately looking for inspiration, blah blah blah. I just go through them now just as a fan. You know, I may go back to Cages, you know, every year or every couple of years and, you know, spend a half an hour or an hour just kind of going through it and remembering how incredible this work was. But I tend to, once I've kind of absorbed the lessons from an artist or whomever, I don't tend to kind of go back and try to learn more from them because there's such a world of, there's almost too much like great talent out there. When I was starting out, there was much less competition, you know, honestly. I'm sure there were just as many great artists out there, but there were fewer of us who were, well, I shouldn't say us, I don't want to throw myself into the great, you know, realm, but there were much fewer artists who were trying who were actively able to break in. And now first of all, people don't need to kind of break in the same way that I broke in. They can kind of do everything they want on their own, which I love. But you know, there's just so much stuff out there. There's no reason to look at anybody's work in a way. Like no reason to look at my work because there's 10 other people who are a million times better than I'll ever be. Like right there on your phone as soon as you turn it on. So it's a different world.
Yeah. No, I think that's it. There is so much stuff out there, and I think it has shifted the way that there was in the like 90s and 2000s. There was a lot more like, oh, I should be reading X, or I really have to catch up and read this thing. And in the past like 10, 15 years, I've noticed a lot of people are just reading whatever. They're going down their rabbit holes, and it's really splitting. And I haven't seen a lot of those 90s black and white guys like really get pulled back in. So I'm waiting for the rabbit hole to go back down their way, because they do stuff that's so distinctly that era and that style that I don't think I think so much as today's influenced by like cartoons and by like manga and stuff like that like, but then like we were just saying, like things are getting reprinted and someone's gonna find it again.
Someone's just find it, absolutely.
Yeah.
Never goes away.
I wanted to bridge from those guys, and specifically thinking about Chaikin and to the work that you're doing in Godhead. I heard a long time ago that in American Flag, Howard Chaikin, he would draw like a supercomputer of some kind, and it would have all these like buttons and whatever on it, and even though in the comic a character only presses one button and something happens, he would still know what so many other buttons were meant to do. It wasn't just like a Kirby, like I drew a wild computer thing. It was for him, it was like, no, this computer exists here for a reason.
That sounds like Chaikin.
Yeah.
Got a big brain.
Yeah, and I was wondering how much of, if you have had a similar sort of headspace in stuff that you're designing for Godhead. So, because there's some wild technology in Godhead, and it was like, this is very complicated, and I'm not sure I understand it. But I didn't know how much of it you had thought out, or if you were sort of like on the high line of like, this machine allows you to talk to God. I do not need to think out too much more outside of.
Yeah, great question. I thought a lot about the tech in Godhead, generally speaking. The one area that I didn't put that much thought into was the actual talking to God part, because who gives a shit? It's like, that is to me, an explanation as to how this machine came about is the least interesting part of the story. So when I was, this book was a long road to the page, It got rejected and rejected some more, and it got rejected so many times that I threw it into a drawer. And one of the early rejections was from DC Comics, and they were the first people who came to me and said, "Dude, we like the story, but we've got an issue with the whole God machine. How's it work?" I'm like, "Guys, what? You're Superman. You think Superman's logical? Like, great." So because I wanted to like sell the comic, I played the game, and I came up with like a total bullshit explanation for the machine. I mean, it was interesting in and of itself, but it was clearly put there to appease powers that were, and then the book didn't sell to them. Fast forward, 15, 20 years, whatever the hell, and the comic book got optioned for a TV show. And one of the first things that the writers and the showrunner came to me about was, how does the stupid machine work? I still had no explanation because I still didn't care. And the interesting thing was that they cared. They cared so much that they put a lot of thought into it. And they showed me their pitch when they finally finished their first draft. And their explanation was excellent. It was so good that I was kicking myself for not having actually put the thought and care into like coming up with that myself. So I kind of stole them a little bit just because, writers steal. And but yeah, so for the most part, I did put a lot of thought into it. I watched, I did a lot of research about what was going on with robotics companies like Boston Dynamics and a whole host of others that I'm of course blanking when I need their names the most in front of an audience. And there's a lot of incredible AI technology out there that exists today that is that kind of as fantastical as some of the technology is in Godhead. It's actually not that fantastical. It's only fantastical in terms of scale. I've decided to create these 25-foot murder robots. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but we've got
You have 3-foot ones.
yeah, there's 6-foot murder robots out there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that's so funny because growing up reading so much superhero stuff, they would just say gamma rays, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what those are, but they sound wild. And so when you have the bath in Godhead that people dip into, I wasn't like, what's the chemical makeup of that? I was just like, okay, that's how it works. Great.
That came from a dream. I had this dream years ago where I was the early '90s, where I was part of this research group, and we were in this deep underground, very dark scientific facility. There's some bad stuff going on there, and there was this cube of water, and it didn't have a shell. It wasn't contained within a tank. It was just a solid cube of water, and you could just walk into the water and be able to breathe and do whatever you needed to do. And that dream just stuck with me for years. I've never forgot that dream. It was so evocative. And finally it's time to do the comic, and that was the first thing that came to mind. But it's a concept as abstract as being able to talk to the God of your choice is, I always felt like trying to reduce that to a rational explanation kind of robbed it of the kind of power it's meant to have. It's supposed to be kind of a redemptive idea in a way. And I don't know, just explanations too.
No, yeah. I think it's in a way it's like if you're making a deal with the devil kind of story. I don't really need to know the contract that you have. It's just here's the outcome. Here's the monkey's paw curling in on you.
It's gonna be bad.
Yeah, yeah, it's not.
It's not gonna end well.
I think, mentioning sort of DC and the superhero comic stuff and it coming through now with Fanta, you sort of mentioned in relation to, I was reading about your some of your Marvel work, that it felt to you like an official comic instead of a weird side comic thing.
Weird ass, stupid.
Yeah.
Comics, yeah.
And so I'm kind of I guess again, as someone who reads a lot of comics, I'm wondering what for you the distinction is between an official comic and what that feels like for you, where versus your weird comics, because I don't find your comics weird, you know? Like I find them like
That's because you're weird.
Oh, okay. Well, no, next question, I guess. But like I think that some of your comics do deal with like supernatural, or they deal with a lot. There's lots of like sex in your comics and things that definitely aren't the like Disney seal of approval stuff.
Hell no.
But
Looking at you, Luke Cage.
but I'm wondering how much of that sort of perception maybe comes from like the industry catching up to a point where like when you starting out, these would be the weird offshoot things that you weren't seeing anywhere else. And now as I'm reading through it, like, you know, since then Vertigo's happened, since then there are Image has exploded as a publisher, that there is like these things don't seem so weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like the mainstream, to a large extent, is caught up with the indie movement from like the 80s and 90s. One of the most shocking comics that was ever published, when I was, before I got my work published, was, Hate to Bring Shaken back again. But he did a comic book in 1988, I think, called Black Kiss, which was it was this porno vampire comic essentially, and that had never been seen.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that it had been done like in the undergrounds, and I'm sure there's some obscure, indie comic book that covered similar terrain, but that had never been done by a mainstream, celebrated cartoonist. Black Kiss would not cause any kind of controversy today if it were published.
No.
Well, you know what? Maybe it would, because of the trans representation. That might cause an issue, but it would not have the same kind of ability to cause controversy. I don't believe that it did back then.
I think when Black Kiss 2 came out, we had to find a different way to get it across the border, because the Diamond wouldn't distribute it across the border because of its pornography. But that's just Diamond being like a comics distributor. Like no one else cared. Like from like a critical perspective, there wasn't like an uproar like, how dare you make this comic or anything. So yeah, I think that was interesting.
But even in terms of like just kind of storytelling techniques and acceptance of art style, and acceptance to some extent of just different types of representation. I think stuff that was, I can't imagine, like, for example, I just picked up Cliff Chang's Catwoman Lonely City, which is just magnificent looking comic. And I can't imagine like the DC of the 80s and 90s. Cliff has got such an out there style, such an indie style, such a non-mainstream superhero comics as we've come to define its style. His work would have been unacceptable I know this because I've gone into meetings with those editors and executives with not a totally dissimilar style, like not a mainstream style, and was told with no uncertain terms, too abstract, too weird, too indie, draw like Greg Land was the big one. Draw like Greg Land, I got told. Draw like whomever was like a lot artist. Draw like Rob Liefeld, I got told once. That's not happening. And yet Cliff and other artists like him who don't have that kind of mainstream approach, are able to find a home and thrive. I think that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, and he has to find a mix too between the superhero stuff and like indie stuff as well to feed that, which I think makes sense. I'm just looking at the time and I want to make space for people to ask questions from the audience. So I just had one other question that I had. You mentioned how Godhead was like a long process. I think it was like 20 years from when you started thinking about it until it came out.
Remind me.
Which, well, I think in some of the things that I read where you're reflecting on it, you're talking about how you, there are lots of stories you want to tell and you have energy to tell them. And I think that kind of gets reflected in not just the breadth of different kinds of stories you're telling, but like you have your own books that you're writing and drawing. You have the Resurrectionists that you've written and is coming out. Someone else is drawing. You have the Stone books coming out in print and stuff. And recently you did a movie. Like I'm wondering where that energy comes from, and like, is the energy that you have this backlog of stories, or are you finding that you're always getting new things coming in?
Both.
Yeah.
I mean, it's honestly, it's a bit of a curse. I've tried to walk away from being this person many times. I've had corporate jobs. I've had, I was in IATSE for a while as a camera grunt. I've had a lot of sojourns outside of comics. And for whatever reason, it's like, it's Al Pacino and Godfather 3. They keep pulling me they keep dragging me back in. I just murdered them, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And yeah, man. So it's a combination. I've got a million ideas from the past that I still think are valid. A new thing just came up last night. I was in my hotel room. I was walking around Vancouver yesterday. It's a city I love. This is a beautiful town. I was thinking about moving here actually all day yesterday. And I was down at the dock at the near the shipping yards. And I texted one of my movie buddies. I was like, dude, I just had the best idea for a film right here in Vancouver at the shipping yards. And I laid it out to him. And then I was in my hotel room after that, and then the second half of the story, looking at the mountains, jumped into my mind. That is a sickness, all right? You should not be assaulted by this type of thing at all times. But that's the way my brain system works.
I was wondering about it too in relation to when you're pulling from other stuff. Like I think you were talking about in relation to King and how people were asking like, oh, would you ever do a bio comic like this again? Because it's become a bit of a mini industry of itself in comics.
Shocking.
It
was not like that when we started. I can tell you that.
And it was not. And I mean, the ones that are coming out now are definitely nothing like King. Like King is so strongly like its own thing in a great way. But with I think, but I was thinking about like again when I was reading Sand and Fury, or reading Godhead. There's lots of like biblical quotes. There's lots of proverbs, like bookending things. And so even when you're just like, I'm gonna go to the park and read a book for a bit, as you're reading through that book, are you just like, oh, I'm gonna remember that. I'm gonna keep that.
Always, yeah. I can't turn that off. I used to work as I was a reporter for a while, and we used to have like weekly meetings where our particular cohort would gather in like the conference room with the paper, and our boss would just sort of check in on how we were doing and blah blah blah. And every couple of weeks or so, they would get like one of the really seasoned reporters to come in and talk with us and just sort of see how we're doing, give us advice, and blah blah blah. And one of the reporters, blanking on her name now, but she was a really seasoned reporter. Actually a columnist. She kind of graduated from being a reporter to a columnist, a political commentator. And she said something I never forgot. She said, I'm always reading. I never stop reading because first of all, it just keeps my mind engaged. It keeps my creative muscle engaged. And it keeps me informed. I never know when I'm gonna learn a tidbit here, be exposed to a quote, a theory, a concept that I can then use to enrich my own work. And that just stuck with me. And it's a simple thing, just keep the information coming in, and that's proven really beneficial for me.
And I think that with a lot of creators who are fans of the thing that they're creating, and so I think movies is a great example where people who love movies just watch movies all the time, and then it's like, yeah, but what are you doing? Like pull from it, and pull from and be reading and be like listening to stuff, and so you're always pulling
from one source.
Yeah, that's cool. That's great. Like I said, being mindful of time. We got about 15 minutes. Do folks in the audience have questions they want to ask at all?
I'd appreciate a question or two. Hey, my friend, how are you?
Good. How you doing, man?
Not too bad.
First off, sorry to hear about the Luke Cage. I think you were posting about it a while back, and you would have killed it.
Thank you, sir. Hey, is that Karis? Hey, girlfriend.
Is this on?
Would be there.
It's the train's birthday.
Oh, okay, that's what was going on.
Yeah.
They were honking the.
Yeah, got its own band.
It's on. Okay. I guess my question maybe is about pitching, and you're talking about the pitch process and the rejections and things like that. is it you directly pitching? Do you have representation that helps you pitch, or what's the process look like for someone like yourself that's established and been in the game for 25 years? I'd say so, man.
Thank you for letting me know that. These days, it's a combination of all of the above, because I've managed to develop some pretty strong relationships with editors and whatnot over the years. So there are a group of people that I've maintained a good relationship with that I can just go to directly and say, how do you feel about X, Y, Z? So that's kind of nice, because wow, it was not like that for a long time. But I also am lucky enough to have representation, and this person can. The fallacy about having a rep for anybody who's doesn't have one, who's interested in getting one, any creative people in here, they're not going to get you work. All right, it's very rare for them to actually get you a job. It's usually you who's hustling. But what they can do is they can put you in front of certain people. Some of the time. Usually, if I have an idea, I will give it to this particular rep, and he can then send it out. But it's still up to me to have the goods and to prove that I can actually deliver the goods and be cool enough to work with. That's a big thing, just be cool enough to work with. But occasionally, this person has been able to come to me with so and so. I met so and so, and they're interested in X, Y, or Z. It's just I would never. Again, if anybody's gunning to get a rep, don't go in assuming that they're gonna magically turn your career around and get you all these great jobs, because it's 90% of the time it's up to you. In my experience.
Yeah, they're there to help make sure that the deal that you get,
yeah,
they're negotiating that part.
Exactly. This guy's perfect for that. I feel totally protected with him. I know he's not gonna rip me off. He's always got my best interests at heart. So that's where I really rely on him, but not to get me a good job.
That's great. And any other folks have questions?
Other questions? Don't be shy. Thank you so
I
much.
bet you I can project without a microphone.
You
Can
can.
hear me?
I certainly can.
Yeah.
So,
But maybe not everybody else
Yes,
can.
Hi, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Don't like microphones. No, I feel like it is not. So is it true that you do quite a bit of film work?
Yes.
So, and maybe this is a silly question, but how do you manage to balance your personal comic work with your film work? I find film just kind of sucks you in.
Yes. Yeah, it
takes
certainly
you off
does.
in another direction.
Oh my God. Well, like I said, I used to be with IATSE, and that was 6 day weeks, 17 to 20-hour days. Destroyed my relationship. It was not good. I was miserable all the time. What was great about it was seeing the Hollywood machine at work. I learned so much, and it was on that level. It was really exciting, but wow, it took a lot. Took a lot out of me. So these days, the film work that I'm doing, I've got 2 movies that I'm trying to direct that are in development. But in the development stage, it's not like you're crushing yourself with ridiculous hours, 7 days a week. And I'm also I got commissioned to write a few scripts. So and the deadlines in them are tight, but not so tight that I can't breathe at all. So right now on the film side, things are actually really comfortable, and that allows me. I'm sort of in a nice position for once in my life where I can kind of do the day job, as it were, and still have time on the weekends, let's say, or in the evenings to kind of crank out some comics. But I'm kind of taking a little break from the comics right now. I just finished a huge book, and I just kind of need a little time to breathe, and also to get hungry again. I think when you do a thing, especially if you've been lucky enough to do it for a while, there can be a tendency to just work all the time. We got bills to pay. Life is tough. And, nothing comes for free. But I think it's also a good to just want it again. If I were to do another, I am doing some comics right now. I'm drawing some stuff for Marvel, but that's very low. It's like a short thing. It's not like something that Godhead, where it's hundreds of pages. This is something I can kind of do and not destroy myself. The next time I get into a situation where I'm gonna destroy myself, it's probably gonna be another year or so, because I gotta really wanna get back to that board and draw like badly, you know? So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Well, you took a long break from drawing after you finished Volume 2, didn't you?
yeah.
It was like, I think I saw on your Instagram you said it was like a year?
I finished it a year ago. I'm still not ready to draw a big ass comic again. Things take a lot of work out here.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, because how does that, like, so much of creative work is about like that creative muscle and like keeping, especially something like drawing, like keeping skills going forward. Do you just kind of roll with what has changed with your drawing after you take a year break, or do you?
Pretty much. I mean, what else can you do? You know. I mean, it's not that I never stopped drawing. Like I'm always like sketching or designing something or whatnot. Right now, we're getting ready the print versions of Stone and Rizzo, like you mentioned, and these are the 2 ebooks that I published with a company called Neotext like a year or so ago, and right now I'm like designing the covers and designing some some symbols that are relevant to the narrative. It never stops, but your art's gonna change. It should change. And you're gonna lose some people when you change your style a little bit, but you're gonna gain a few too. David Keane, again. There's a certain era where I really love David Keane's work, and I more respect it now than love it. And it's not that the quality has gone down. He's evolved in a different way. He's still an insane artist. I was privileged enough to see some of his original art about a month ago at a friend's house. Lucky bastard. And the work is astonishing, but it doesn't grab me the way that it's evolved. It doesn't grab me the way that it used to. But he's gained other fans as a result of this evolution. So you shouldn't worry about how your work is going to change. It's going to work for some period of time.
Any other questions from folks?
Yeah.
We're ready.
Hello?
Hello, sir.
I have a question about writing for comics or for graphic novels.
Yes, sir.
I think some stories are better told with words, other stories are better told with pictures. What's your experience with writing for graphic novels or for comics?
You mean like in terms of like choosing which story works as a graphic novel as opposed to
Yeah, what works well?
That's a good question. Sometimes it's it's based on what the client wants. I mean, some of my work is self-generated, but a lot of it is commissions too. So if the client wants it to be a comic or X, Y, or Z, that's where you go. But in terms of like my personal stuff, it's really kind of instinctual, Like for example, I was telling you guys about that, I had this like idea for an action movie last night. At no point did it occur to me that should be a graphic novel, because what inspired it were the locations. We're seeing those mountains and seeing the shipping yard. I could tell that same story, I'm sure, as a novel or as a graphic novel, but it was conceived, it's been in conception for like 24 hours, but in the last 24 hours, I'm thinking of it as a film we should make. So it kind of depends. The stuff I'm doing with Stone and Rizzo is these are novellas, and they are they're kind of sort of a dystopian future type of story where the Republican desire for fascism, dictatorship at all ends actually becomes true, and we're living kind of in this horrible fascist world, and much like now, and that was always conceived to be, at its conception was meant to be IP designed for the page, but meant to appeal to a cinema executive, and that's kind of exactly how it played out. So, but it was always at the same time, even though it ultimately was designed as a sort of a stealth sales tool, me as a writer always went into it as, no, this has to work on the page, even if it goes nowhere. It has to live and succeed.
Yeah, and I think there's in a good example of that is in Stone. There's, especially at the beginning, there's a part where you're doing that info dump of like, here's what happened in history, here's what we're catching up to, here's the like how the tax works now, and there's not really a way of doing that as quickly and cleanly. Just like, let me tell you this real quick, that is served by a movie would have to tell it differently so that's engaging as a movie, and a comic would have to tell it differently so it's engaging as a comic. But as like a fun pulp novel, it's just like, okay, here's the 3-paragraph download I'll take and stuff, and it just like feeds really quickly.
And the interesting thing is the script adaptation I'm working on. We're just about to do, as soon as I get back home, like a whole big ass Zoom conference call with the executives to talk about the next draft. 15 pages of notes they gave me on draft 2, by the way, guys. 15.
It's a long
Absorb that for a
Zoom
second. Yeah, it's gonna be a big one. In adapting that story for the screen, I found I shit-canned like 70% of what was in the novel and created a whole different structure. We took what was necessary to tell the screen story, but so much of what worked on the page wouldn't work on the screen. So it's a fascinating process.
Yeah,
it's really complicated actually.
Yeah, I always see that when things get adapted from like a play to a movie, and I'm like, this still feels like a play. Because they haven't added the extra playground that you get to have with a movie, and again, like vice versa. When you're taking a book to a thing, you're like, well, if we're going to talk about playing basketball, it's going to take up this much more time. I can't just say like, shoot a hook shot. That's it.
No, we have to dramatize that in the actual script.
Yeah, that's fine. We have time for one more question. If anyone has a question in there, it's okay if not.
They're bored with us already.
It's okay.
It's exhausting,
so you have a bunch of stuff coming out. You have the books, the print books coming out. You have, when does the Resurrectionist come out? When's that due? Next year, isn't it?
Sometime late next year, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, I just saw the first 57 pages of layouts for it, and my mind was blown. I'm so excited about it. So yeah, I think folks are appreciating it.
You're going to be busy. And then Godhead 2 is out and available now, and I think they have it at the table just on the right when you leave out of here. So people can grab that. And you have signing now till?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure
Thank
chatting with
you
you.
so much.
Thanks for everyone. Round of applause for coming out, folks.